Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another amazing and creative woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hi, my name is Dina Friedman. I am 65 years old, and I am talking to you from Hadley, Massachusetts, which is in the western part of Massachusetts in the United States. We're about 2 hours from Boston, 3 hours from New York, but in the country. And my story begins, well, it really begins when I was 5 years old, because I remember sitting on the couch. My mother came in and she said, "Close your eyes." And I thought, oh, wow, I'm getting a present. This is fun. Or she's playing hide and seek. I didn't really know why she was telling me to close my eyes, but she went over to the piano and she started playing notes. And she said, "What note is that?" And I said, "D." And then she played another note and she said, "What note is that?" And I said, "F sharp." And whatever note she played, I was able to name. And for me at 5 and through most of my life, this was no big deal. It was like somebody pointing to the color red and saying, "What color is this?" I mean, I just heard the notes and I had played a little bit of piano, so I kind of knew what they were. And I could easily figure out from sound what the note was. But this is a fairly rare, not super rare, but fairly rare attribute that some people have, called perfect pitch. And my mother was really excited. She said, "Wow, you have perfect pitch." And I had no idea what perfect pitch meant, but I harped down on that word perfect. And somewhere along the line, I get this idea that because I had perfect pitch, that meant I was a fabulous pianist, or I was geared to be on this musician prodigy track. And prodigy was another word that my parents really didn't use about me because it wasn't accurate, but sometimes they would invite their friends over and ask me to play, and these friends would say, "Oh, she's such a little prodigy, blah, 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 blah." And so I had this idea in my head that my goal, or my vocation, my calling, was to become this amazing concert pianist. Well, there was one problem with this idea, which was that I'm a decent pianist. I mean, as a kid, I was pretty good, if you use words like good and bad, which I try to avoid, but I was not a great pianist. My technique wasn't good. And it was pretty clear early on, maybe by the time I was 10 or 11, that I was not somebody who was really going to make it on the prodigy track or on the professional track. And this was exacerbated by the fact, this disappointment was that there were many, many professional musicians in my family, not my parents, but several of my grandparents, a lot of great uncles. And those who were professional musicians were kind of worshiped as gods. So I continued on playing piano through junior high school and 13, 14, getting very, very frustrated as pieces got harder and I wasn't able to play them well. And by the time I was 14, I asked my teacher if I could play this piece I loved, and she said, no, you can't. It's too hard for you. And I'm thinking, yes, I can. I can do this. I'm going to play this piece. And so for months, I would try to practice this piece and try to play it well, and I never could. And I finally said, okay, this is it. I'm quitting. So I had this huge baggage from the piano, even when I quit lessons, I kept playing the piano because I loved playing the piano. But I had this feeling in myself that I was a failed musician and that I should have been a much better musician. So let's first fast forward maybe, I'm in my 30s now. And my children, I have two children, and both of them are really interested in music. My younger child has perfect pitch. When I ask them to go to the piano, they pick out pieces that they heard just by ear. My older child does not have perfect pitch, but she plays beautifully, beautifully, beautifully. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is great. They are going to perpetuate this family legacy of, the musicians being the best, most perfect people in our family that I couldn't do. And so my children went on their musical path. And they got on it a little longer than I did, but for various circumstances. One had an injury, the other went to conservatory, but then didn't make it into festivals that were important. And both of them ended up doing different things. My younger child is a professional musician, but not on the heavy duty classical music track. So here I am. And I'm going to fast forward now another 20 years. And here I am. It's 2020. We are in the pandemic. It's really, really quiet. The isolation is deadly. And I'm thinking I would really like to play the piano again. But the piano is so loaded for me. So even though I have this piano, this beautiful piano that I bought my older child, and hasn't been played too much, I decide that what I'm going to do in the pandemic, I'm not a bread baker, is I'm going to sit down every night and I'm going to start to play the piano again. And my goal at this point for playing the piano is to play without judgment, which is extremely difficult than the hardest piece or even the easiest piece. So my deal with myself is the minute I start judging myself, I have to get up and walk away. And I am trying to take what I've learned. I practiced yoga for 15 years. I'm trying to take that into my piano playing and learn to think about process rather than product. Well, this was not an easy thing, but maybe over the years since when I was younger, I did learn one thing that was really important, which was to be patient with myself, to love myself a little bit more, to recognize that it's okay not to be perfect, that the goal of playing is playing. There's an old adage, practice makes perfect, but really practice makes patience, practice makes progress, practice opens insight. So through this process, which was not easy, I'm kind of making the story seem easy, like first I couldn't and then I could, but it was extremely loaded for me because I had to go into my whole family baggage and figure out why I had assimilated all these messages about playing the piano and being a professional musician and having perfect pitch and all this stuff. And I had to kind of understand why my family was the way it was. I also realized I had done a number of my children by really pushing the music thing so hard, and I needed to ask them to forgive me. And somehow it was really different to be practicing as an adult with all of this in mind. And so what I decided to do is that I was going to write this story. At first I thought, well, who cares? Who cares about me playing the piano? But I was in an online writing group and I am a professional writer. Somehow I don't have the writing baggage that I have for music baggage. I published 2 novels and I have a short story collection coming out, and I published a number of poems. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to journal write about practicing and about perfect pitch and about this story of really untangling this knot in my family where music was worshiped, but it was also a very loaded topic. So after about a year, it's now 2021, a few things happened. Number one is I'm still not a prodigy. I'm still not going anywhere near the concert area, but I am a much more fluid pianist than I was in 2020. Now it's 2022, and I'm still practicing many nights, and I see that I can continue to get better. And now, when I mess up, which happens often, instead of beating myself up and starting with all the messages of, oh, I'll never play the piano and I'm a terrible musician, I just laugh and go on to something else. And then the other thing that has happened from 2020 to 2022 is I have what I call a music memoir. This book is called Imperfect. My book is called Imperfect Pitch. So one of the things that happened is actually over the years, I lost my ability to discern notes, which apparently happens a lot to people once they reach the age of about 50. So this is not unusual. But more, it's really about embracing myself in feeling that it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to have imperfect pitch. And I went through the process of asking my children to forgive me. And when I did, they both kind of said, "What are you talking about, Mom? You were fine. You no problem." But that was another thing that I beat myself up for, was this idea that I was pushing my children too hard. So I was pleased when they told me that I hadn't. And so I am really excited about telling my story, not because anybody should really care about me and the piano, but I believe that most of us are inherently creative or have something inside them that they want to express. And as a writer, I'm constantly mentoring other writers who may be less far along the path than I am, but I am want to be, my goal in life is to be as encouraging as possible to writers. And I also, in writing this book, want people who are musicians, who are wannabe, I don't like the word wannabe, who want to be musicians, who want to express themselves through visual art, who want to dance, act, sing, whatever. I think it's really important that we embrace our own creativity and that we find within us that really important place of self expression. And we tell ourselves that we matter, that this matters. It matters not only to us, but when we are expressing something through a creative modality, no matter how supposedly good, accomplished, or not skilled we are tackling it with our whole heart. So we are absolutely trying to be creative and being creative. And we need to embrace that. Our culture needs to embrace that. Our culture is a place where usually only celebrities are embraced. Your art, whatever your art is not taken seriously unless you've reached a certain level of accomplishment or fame. And we need to change that in our culture because I think we'll all be happier, both individuals and as a society, if we can all really embrace our creativity, no matter how imperfect it is. So that is my story.
What an incredible story you've had, Dina. It's interesting the use of the word perfect and how no matter what it is you're working on, we can beat ourselves up and judge ourselves based on a certain line that we deem to be perfection. Now, if there was somebody who's listening to us right now, could be a musician, like you said, a writer, a poet, who is judging themselves and is seeing all these imperfections in themselves. Based on what you've learned in the last couple of years, what three nuggets of wisdom could you help them with so they can get over that?
Well, the first one I would say is that you are perfect just the way you are. I mean, on one level, we should eliminate the word perfect from our vocabulary because ultimately nothing is perfect. And as a writer, I mean, I am constantly revising and revising and revising. So it doesn't mean that every word I commit to paper is perfect or every note I might play on the piano is perfect. But you are more than that. You are more than that. What you say matters. So you need to love yourself. And need is a bad word too, but you it would be helpful for you to learn to love yourself. That's like a key goal, no matter where you are. And to stop, you can draw lines in the sand. Of course, we all aspire to get better at whatever it is that we do, but that doesn't mean that where we are now is a bad place. One thing that I learned from researching my book is that humans acquire something called negativity bias, where we hear, if people say a bunch of positive things and one negative thing, we hear the negative thing, and that's the one that we elevate the most. And they've done studies that show that this starts when you're about 1 year old. So, how do we unlearn perfectionism? So, that would be one thing that I would say. A second thing that I would say is, and this is still a hard one for me, is to stop putting so much pressure on yourself. That the goal is to really be okay with where you are, even as you strive to be in a different place. And I think about one of the other things I did in the pandemic every day is, as I said, I live in the country. So I went for a walk every single day in the woods behind my house. And especially in the winter, the scenery was just gorgeous. And what I started doing is I would just look at something and I would say, wow, look at the way the ice is crusted on that dam. Look at the snow on that tree. Or in the summer, look at the way the light is shining through those leaves. And the point is, that's what we want to say to ourselves too. Wherever we are, we just want to say, wow. Doesn't mean we don't want to keep going on the hike and seeing the next wow, but we want to really be happy with that wow. And then the third thing that I would say would be that creativity really matters. That we, again, live in a culture where often it isn't treated seriously unless you are famous or accomplished. But I believe that everybody's creativity really matters, not only to them, but whatever it is that they are communicating to the wider world, if they choose to do that, or to the small group of people with whom they share their art, that matters. And it matters just as much as anything that's shared by a famous person.
As parents, sometimes we live vicariously through our children. You know, I grew up in Africa. Like you, I was very gifted in terms of tuning into music. I could listen to a piece of Mozart and recite it note for note. I had this mind that remembered music, but I never got to study music. It was too expensive. I dreamed to play the piano. I couldn't. Then I had these three children and threw them into all of the things I couldn't do when I was a child. Now, it sounds like your mom was probably in the same situation. She was inspired to help you become a musician, maybe because she had aspired to be a musician. Tell me a little bit about your background, your family, and how music plays such a large role, and what parents who are listening to us right now can do to help their own children not fall into the same trap of getting them to live our lives that we failed to have.
Well, that's a great question, because I have it on both sides. So My grandfather, my mother's father, was a symphony violinist, and he lived next door to us when I was growing up. And my strong memory of him is I would go to visit my grandmother, and my grandfather would be in the living room practicing for hours and hours and hours. Mostly he played violin, and he mostly would just be standing in front of the mirror, frowning at himself, playing one note at a time. My aunt told me that he was obsessed about how Beethoven would want him to play something. And so he always felt that it was never ever good enough, no matter what. My mother did play the piano, and she insists, because I did, she's still living, she's 88, and she insists that there was never any pressure on her to be good. She said at one point, she said, well, I knew I wasn't, she said, I knew I wasn't as good. She said, and she loves music. And she said, I would hear pieces, I would hear the way they were supposed to be played, and I couldn't make them sound that way. So that was why she ended up not going into piano. So when she said that to me, I thought, and this was during part of my research for writing the book, I thought, wow, story of my life. And in all fairness to my mother, I mean, she did give me piano lessons, and I felt this unspoken expectation. But the key word there was it was unspoken. And I think it was more from this image of my grandfather and the way that music was revered in our family. My mother did not yell at me when I didn't practice enough. I mean, she didn't push me at all. She was pretty laid back about the situation, although she did insist that I take piano lessons, and it was kind of a big deal when I said I was going to quit. But I don't think she had this expectation that I would be professional. This was something that I kind of put on myself as this would be the thing that would that was our family history, our family destiny. Um, my children, when we go to another generation, when my daughter said she wanted to take piano lessons, I remember saying to my husband, I just want her to have piano in my life, because I always had piano in my life, even when I wasn't playing very much. I was always just playing around for fun. I don't need her to be professional. And then she ended up taking to it very easily. And she didn't want to be a professional concert pianist, but she did want to go on that track at least through college, because she felt that she wanted the training. And when I spoke to her about it, she said, well, if you did anything wrong, it was you kept saying do music because you love it, when you should have given me more support about trying to do it in a more serious way. So it kind of feels like you can't win. And my younger child, who kind of never wanted to do anything else, I mean, they did go to conservatory, but I did feel like I did live somewhat vicariously through them. And when my daughter got injured her arms in high school just before she was going to audition for conservatory, I felt as if my world had fallen apart. And I was asking myself this very hard question: wait, whose world is this? Is it her world or my world? And my daughter is a very happy person, playing piano as she can. My younger child is also a very happy person doing their own version of music. So, um, what can parents do? I mean, the only thing I can say, and this is 2020 hindsight, is listen to your children. I mean, just be in the background. If you can afford it and they want lessons and they want to go that path, then be their number one fan and cheerleader. And if they don't, then don't push them. Let them take the lead, because it's not an easy path. So I did find that in the music world, when my kids were doing music, there were certainly some parents that were obviously pushing their kids to do what they couldn't do. And I'm very happy that even though I felt that I was doing that, that neither of my children perceived me as doing that.
Now, the book that you wrote, what can people get out of this book? Whether they are people who want to go into music or those who just do it for a passion, what are the main take homes that you have shared through this memoir?
Okay. The main takeaway, I think, is that you can do, is to love yourself wherever you are on the path. And what I think people will get out of it, it's interesting because people who have read it have said, if you if you're teaching music, it can just be helpful to think about the mindset of students. If you have done the conservatory thing, my younger child said everybody should read this who's been through music trauma. So those are some things that I think they can get out of that.
We have to live our passion. So let's take you now into the future as my last question for you. You're now 100 years old and you're sitting in your rocking chair surrounded by your kids, your grandchildren, your dogs, and your cats. If I could take you there and you could have a conversation with the future you, this wise woman who's lived an amazingly creative life, what would you say to her based on how you're living your life right now?
I think the most important thing that I would say, because I think no matter how much I try to toot these ideas about creativity and perfection and loving yourself, they're still really hard to assimilate. So I would just say what you did mattered, whatever it was, whatever, so including the things I've done so far and the things that I haven't done yet, that they mattered. They mattered not only to me, but they mattered to the people with whom I came in contact, that they touched other people. That would be it. If I knew, there's a scene in the book where I felt like, I was playing every night and my husband would be in his office and he would never listen or say anything. And he's not a musician. And it wasn't like I asked him to. So, fairness to him. But there was one night I was playing the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata, which was a piece that he really liked. And he came out and danced to it. And I thought, this is great. It wasn't that I was playing it particularly flawlessly or, I was still learning it. But I thought, this touched him. This mattered. And I think that's really all we want to do. And whether we do it through our art, through our careers, through our kindness to people, through our volunteer work, through whatever, I think the most important thing is you touch people around you in whatever ways, and your presence matters, your actions matter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dina. This was an amazing interview. Your website is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. So if anybody would like to get in touch and find out more about this upcoming book, go onto Dina's website, follow her through social media, and wait for the coming of this amazing book. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in today, wherever you are in the world. Have a fantastic day, morning, or evening. And Dina, thanks again for the interview.
Thanks so much.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making